Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always. Still in Mexico. What a treat. Very grateful. Coming in hot. Matt Zahab, your host here as always. Super pumped to have today's guest on the show. Also coming in hot from one of the best countries on the planet, and that is France. Coming in hot. Absolutely love it. Today we have Avril, Spaydh, Dutheil, a core contributor of Neutron, and an experienced digital specialist with a background in marketing, community management, digital services, and infrastructure. With a long-standing interest in computing systems and privacy, he started his crypto journey way back in the day when he purchased Bitcoin in his high school cafeteria and went on to work for industry big name DAOs, including P2P and Lido Finance, growing communities and leading strategic business initiatives. He's now focused on supporting the Cosmos ecosystem, which I absolutely love, ushering in secure cross-chain DeFi and creating the next gen of blockchain tech. Super pumped to have you on. Spaydh, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Pumped to have you on, man. Pumped to have you on. Let's go way back in the day here. You have worked for some incredible companies, but before we get into that, we got to talk about your Bitcoin inception story. I absolutely love this. You were at a high school caf. You bought Bitcoin. I mean, this is not a kid-friendly pod. You can be honest. Were you trying to buy some weed? Were you buying drugs? What was going on there? What was your Bitcoin inception story? Give it to us straight up.
No, I wasn't even that entertaining, to be fair. I guess especially during my youth, I tended to be somebody very easily opinionated about things. And around the time of the Snowden revelations and everything, I had grown a sort of distrust of the banking system, although it wasn't really relevant to me, to be fair. I had like maybe $50 a month to play around with. But yeah, around that time, I discovered Bitcoin was a thing. And so like went through the white paper and kind of like just found it fascinating. Also, probably at the time understood like maybe 50% of it, but still, I was like, banking system, transfer of value, but without banks. That's exactly what I wanted in the world. So I started basically putting my like $50 a month in Bitcoin, and I think the first app I ever had was like the Coinbase kind of like mobile app at the time. So I would just log into there from my high school because there was Wi-Fi there, and I used to live in the countryside where the internet was really shite, and so that allowed me to connect, drop my $50 in, feel good about myself, and then obviously I completely careful the entire cycle. So I still hold these Bitcoins to this day because by the time I was in the mental model of like selling them and taking profit, they were down really badly. So a lot of learning experiences there.
Hey, I'm the exact same as you. I've never sold, so not a big trader. Just if you believe in something, hold it long term. The rest will take care of itself. But I absolutely love that. Before we get into obviously everything Neutron and Cosmos related, what else about crypto really got you going? You said it was sort of debanking yourself, unbanking yourself rather, which is huge. But you got in at a young age, which is pretty uncommon. Most people don't get in that young, right? A lot of people who got in are much older than us and were much more mature than us, had more experience than us, and then got in at a later age. You got in hella young. Was there any other reasons just beside sort of, the peer-to-peer ability to transact actual value, to participate in a decentralized economy, Bitcoin as a whole? What else got you going about crypto?
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology itself was fairly interesting, right? It was complex. I don't think I fully grasped exactly how it worked at the time, but it was kind of like an intellectual challenge, which is a piece of actually this industry that has been one of the most attractive aspects to it ever, like to my personality type. I like a good challenge, basically, and I like having to sort of like work to understand how something works. Which is certainly a challenge for general adoption, but like to me, it was a motivating factor of like, this looks interesting and I have to put in some effort to actually crack it down. So there was this element of like, hey, transfers of value without banks. That was kind of like the initial thing. And then when Ethereum kind of like came around, or at least I picked up on it, that kind of like blew my mind because now it was, hey, let's do what Bitcoin did to transfers of value, but now let's apply this to anything you can put on a computer, which is, a good chunk of our modern life. And so, this combination of like understanding a piece of technology, which I was very fond of. Like I was building computers and such for myself, like just to be gaming basically. I was like looking into how the technology worked, and there was this kind of like philosophical, political kind of like complex that was also appealing. So it was kind of like a really good combo for me to get, I guess, interested in the field.
So cool. And then present day, you are a core contributor at Neutron. This is a good opportunity to introduce Neutron, and we'll get into the nitty gritty. But before we do that, give us the TLDR, give us the elevator pitch. What exactly is Neutron, and what are you and the team working on there?
Yeah, for sure. So Neutron is a smart contract platform that has a few sort of like crucial difference from any other platform. The first one is that, like, first, it's highly secure through a technology called replicated security, which allows it to actually be one of the first blockchains to be secured by restaking. But more importantly, it's a blockchain that allows you to develop smart contracts that you can deploy once, and through Neutron's cross-chain infrastructure, expand across 50 plus blockchains today to onboard users and provide them a seamless experience, but also to expand the reach of your protocol so that it can grow to its full potential without having to maintain multiple instances. And finally, it's a blockchain that sort of like leverages Cosmos's unique value proposition of being able to customize really deep into the blockchain and make that available to application builders to build better applications that you wouldn't be able to build anywhere else, like on Ethereum or other shared environments, essentially. So to recap, Neutron is a highly secure cross-chain smart contracting platform that makes application-specific infrastructure available to developers so that they can build better products and onboard users from anywhere, basically.
Very interesting. And to my knowledge, it's all about sort of broadening liquidity choices, improving DeFi infrastructure. And like you said, and the reason why you guys choose to build on and with Cosmos is to offer developers greater flexibility. We've heard it so many times in crypto, whether it's Twitter, other podcasts, my podcast, whatever the case may be. But without more use cases, we're hooped. And the way to get use cases is to bring devs in. You need really smart guys and gals to come in and build really cool shit on Web3 tech in order for the masses, the everyday Joes and Josephines, to start actually using crypto and Web3. And that's what you guys are doing, and we'd love to see that.
I actually have a bit of a counter take here. So like I agree with most of the conclusions here. There's just one difference that I would make regarding like Cosmos and sort of like what we actually need to progress. And this is largely inspired by Simon Warda from Confio. He makes a really good point, which is that we always say like we need more devs, but like, and especially in Cosmos and Cosmosm, we actually have a lot of devs. There's enough talent here to actually build a number of really, really great applications. One of the things that we're missing and that's bottlenecking us is not just the devs, it's the entrepreneurs that have a product vision, that have an application, that can lead these devs to actually ship products that are meaningfully differentiated, that solve real problems, that will onboard these people, right?
Interesting.
So like there's a separation of concerns here, right? There's a lot of people who can write really good code. And sure, blockchain technology is a bit more, obscure, I guess. It does take some onboarding. But if you have a really good team, you have a very strong vision, and you just need somebody to write the code, you'll find that person with some efforts, because there is a lot of talent, actually. So yeah, I agree with most of the conclusions, but I also think that like it's not just devs, actually, it's also like entrepreneurs themselves.
I love that. That's going right in the show notes. And honestly, that's the first time we've heard that on the show. So you think there's an entrepreneur shortage over a dev shortage? Any like specific areas of sort of Web3 that you think are really lacking? Like if you were to put yourself in the Steve Jobs and the Elon Musk and the Bill Gates, grade A entrepreneur boots, like what areas of crypto would you be attacking so these really talented devs can work some magic and ship some really good products?
I mean, if I had 15 great ideas, I would probably be building them somehow. I mean, I don't have the bandwidth, but I think there's a bunch of stuff, right? Like, I think what we're seeing is that like there's definitely demand for something that combines like elements of like DeFi or say gambling, depending on where in the spectrum these are, and like social interactions. Friend tech and such kind of like demonstrated this, but I don't think anybody has actually produced something that was like sustainable. I think there's a very wide unexplored area of using blockchain technologies to effectively replace governments, to enable essentially like various forms of democracy and kind of like social organizations that are more decentralized. Like if you look at like ant colonies, they have this ability to sort of like coordinate at the very, very low level between themselves without having necessarily this very vertical hierarchy that we have. Potentially, we can get closer to a model like this using these technologies. So I think that's an interesting application. But what I mean is that like there's a lot of like very far-fetched things that we could be doing with this technology, but whether or not they're something that can be venture-backed, for example, is like a big question. Like not everything is necessarily like something that would make money. And so getting the funding to build these things can be harder. On the flip side though, with all of the DeFi rails that we've built, we actually have what it takes to actually build pretty good funding systems. And so combining these things together, we could have a really good like gambling ecosystem and a really good like DeFi ecosystem, potentially something that could take over some of the functions that are currently handled by the traditional financial system, but also provide other services to humanity. But I think that's more of a long-term thing, to be fair. I think the one thing that has product market fit right now is like DeFi, right? Like DeFi is what crypto does best because it's high value and it's coordination between a number of actors that don't necessarily know each other. And so it does so by removing trust. So all of these properties are basically ideal for this use case.
Well said. Let's jump back into Cosmos for a sec. And again, you guys are building on the Cosmos ecosystem. Cosmos, last year, the Terra collapse left a massive liquidity vacuum and burned a massive user base in Cosmos. I want to say end of 2021, early 2022, the Cosmos sort of narrative was one of the hottest narratives in all of crypto. I know tons of people, myself included, who sort of aped into Atom. And then obviously it fell off a cliff, deservedly so. You got to do your research beforehand. And again, c'est la vie, it could have happened to anyone else. But what can the Cosmos ecosystem do to really get to that next level? Because just like you talked about 5 minutes ago, there's so many talented devs. There's so many incredibly smart and talented and driven and hardworking people in the ecosystem. But it still seems like there's not really any sort of, front of mind, consumer-friendly product that we could use every single day. What's the issue there, and how can this be fixed?
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental question. So my assessment of the ecosystem is that Cosmos is well in advance when it comes to technology. Like the infrastructure that exists in Cosmos in terms of like how easily it allows you to do things you wouldn't be able to do anywhere else is just unmatched. The tech is here. Now, on the technical side, the only thing that's missing or not fully there is sort of like tying these components well together so that it all fits nicely into a product. That has been, I think, one of the challenges whereby like IBC on its own is awesome, Cosmos SDK is awesome, Cosmosm is awesome, but like tying these up together so that there's no like UX issues, for example, or such has been a challenge, although it's getting a lot better. I'm really not concerned about the tech. What I think we've sort of like lacked in the ecosystem is distribution. E.g., we have really good applications that benefit from this very good tech, but we have lacked a few elements to really get these kind of like flagship applications that just like boom and achieve really large scale. I think one of them is applications in Cosmos have a bit of a disadvantage to start with because of a lower discoverability. Since the stack is different from like EVM and such, a lot of the most visible, most used kind of like resources to search for opportunities either don't support Cosmos or take longer to integrate. And so it requires more effort comparatively to get like the same, in front of the same number of eyes, essentially. That's one. So like discoverability. The second is onboarding, right? Like once you know that there's an opportunity, you need to be able to get there and use it, right? And I think this is probably one of the most, like in one of the areas where there has been the most pain in the ecosystem, whereby until a couple of months ago, the experience was you would have to bridge funds. It would be slow. It would be costly. You would have to download a new wallet, create a seed phrase, save it on a piece of paper somewhere. Then you would have to sort of like bridge into one chain. Like after bridging to Cosmos, you would have to bridge to another chain, swap, and then bridge to the chain you wanted to use and such. And so this kind of like sequence of action was one, not super intuitive and was a lot longer than what you would have on just like a shared environment, like just like Ethereum, right? Whereby you would have other constraints like gas fees and such, but at least you would understand how to do it. And the reality is that like IBC was very difficult to use to a number of people. Now that has improved tremendously. There are solutions that calculate all of the routes for you so that it's essentially one transaction you get from point A to wherever you want to go in just one transaction. like all of this has gone a long way, but there's still more that we can do. Like, for example, we still need like different wallets to use Cosmos today than we would on other ecosystems. The bridging to the ecosystem, like inside of the ecosystem, bridging is largely solved. Like IBC is, like probably one of the most secure bridging frameworks, and it's built such that you can really use it as you can abstract a lot of these operations away from the user. And so like now we're seeing this sort of like manifest itself. But there's still like a lot of work to be done on bridging into the ecosystem or into applications really, because that's what should matter. Like what I think is the future is you shouldn't even know that you should know if you want to, but you shouldn't have to care that you're bridging, because instead of like looking for networks and then applications on these networks, you should look for applications like, what am I trying to do, right? I have an objective as a user. I want this objective to be met. What is the best place to do that, right? If I want to get exposure to an X token, the only thing I should care about is like, hey, where can I do that? And so I shouldn't have to like think about, okay, so I'll have this sequence of like bridging to X chain and then this other, and then doing the swap and then bridging to another. No, like there's this app, I have funds somewhere, I connect to the app. The app does all of the heavy lifting of bringing the funds, processing the swap, and then returning me what I actually want. So
it's got to be clean. It's got to be clean.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of our big focus. So we said like discoverability was an issue. The second one was sort of like onboarding friction, and the third one I think is Cosmos has a stack that is unique because it allows you to build something that you couldn't build elsewhere. But the problem is that we haven't had that many teams. Like certainly there are, right? Like DYDX is probably one of the latest teams to actually do so, right? To leverage this unique tech to build a unique product. It's one of the most performant perps out there, and it relies on purely decentralized infrastructure. There's no centralized sequencer anymore, which is a technical achievement and a product achievement as well. But beyond DYDX and a few others, it's not really like every application in Cosmos is that meaningfully differentiated for applications you would find on other ecosystems. And I think that's something that as an ecosystem, we need to realize that our strength is building things others just can't build, right? It's not just, marginal improvements, right? Because marginal improvements won't motivate radical changes in behavior, right? If you have two dexes, one is on Ethereum and you can just like click and use it, and the other one requires you to bridge and whatever, the other dex needs to be meaningfully better for you to actually jump jump to that product essentially. And so as an ecosystem, we need to focus on like really, really differentiated product. And so this is kind of like, these three things are kind of like, I think, the three fundamental problems that we're laser focused on solving essentially for Neutron, but also for the ecosystem as a whole right now. And to be fair to developers outside of solving for Neutron and the Cosmos ecosystem, but also really to solve for developers in the industry as a whole. Like one of the stories that exemplifies this like the best is Neutron recently merged with another blockchain. It merged with it essentially. And that blockchain was developed by a very talented team called Duality, which actually started out in the Ethereum ecosystem. And they did a bunch of work around Uniswap and other kind of like leading protocols. And that experience has eventually led them to design sort of like a new generation of a DEX that is a hybrid between an order book and an AMM and has the best of both worlds essentially. But the problem is that when trying to actually build it, they started like facing the limitations of what you can do in the EVM essentially. And trying to break free from these constraints is what led them to Cosmos and eventually to join Neutron. But I think this is the best example of like, if we're successful with our mission, both Neutron and Cosmos as a whole, what we'll end up doing is like unleashing people who have a strong vision of something they want to build, something that doesn't exist today, that can't be built, and will enable them to actually bring it to the market. And I think that's where we can probably bring the most value to the industry and perhaps the world as a whole.
Well said. Spaydh, you're on a roll here, mate. We got to take a quick break and give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show. That is Prime XBT. And when we get back, we are going to dive a little bit more into the neutrality upgrade. And we have some breaking news as this episode is going to air next week. And that is early December. And that is the strategic acquiring of 25% of Confio. Can't wait to get into that as well. Until then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends and sponsors of the cryptonews.com podcast. Prime XBT offers a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also offering innovative products and professional trading conditions to all customers, and a huge exclusive promo code that is CryptoNews50 to take advantage of this offer and receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, the promo code is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Now back to the show with Spaydh. Let's jump into the neutrality upgrade. You just spoke about the integration of duality and how that helps just sort of bolster and beef up the Cosmos ecosystem. How exactly does that improve the DeFi infrastructure? I tried to really understand this. I took I wouldn't say a deep dive, but sort of skimmed over some notes regarding this. Couldn't really get into it. I'd love if you could explain that. I'm sure the listeners are super curious as well in regards to how the integration of duality really helps improve DeFi infrastructure for the whole ecosystem.
I think there's a few aspects to it, right? Like the first one is it allows smart contract developers to leverage infrastructure that's tremendously flexible and that is capable of doing things that wouldn't be just natively possible as just a set of smart contract, right? Because it can leverage the blockchain, like the metal essentially itself, to essentially like execute certain functions, provide better execution as a result and such. And so one, it's a very strong, very flexible piece of infrastructure for any like developers building or looking to leverage it. Two, it's much better, much more expressive venue for traders and users to engage with, because it allows you to have, like an actual order book, like limit orders, fill or kill, good until canceled, and other functionalities that you would find on the SEX, but not really on a DEX customarily. So it's a better place to trade as well. And then from a more sort of like meta point of view, it's a way to resolve competition within the ecosystem, so that instead of sort of like competing for shares of the same pie, we can essentially align the interests of everyone and allow everyone to benefit by basically aggregating order flow and liquidity, so supply and demand effectively, into the same place, so that instead of having like fragmented like strands of order flow, which then get sort of like re-rendered together by aggregators and routers, like third-party services who will take a fee for that service, you can essentially have this from, like out the box, so that the order flow just like as much, like a healthy order flow basically gets in front of the applications and their LPs, e.g. their users, as possible without sort of like these kind of like commissions and such on the way.
I love it. And we just got some breaking news as well. Always love some breaking news on the Crypto News Pod. You and the team strategically acquired 25% of Konfio. Again, by the time this episode airs, the news will go out. I understand it's currently under embargo, but no one else besides our incredible editor, Eustace, will have access to this, and neither of us will be doing anything with this news. But nonetheless, you guys acquired 25% of Konfio, absolutely massive. This will increase performance, security, and integration to the CosmWasm ecosystem. I'd love if you could give us the TLDR on why you acquired them and what this means for the future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Konfio is kind of like one of the most important companies in the entire ecosystem, because they developed one of the leading virtual machines. Last time I checked, it was the third largest VM by developers, or by developer activity. I don't remember exactly, but it's a very significant piece of open source software that like more than 50 blockchains rely on today in production. And it's one that's like very critical to Neutron itself, right? Because smart contracts on Neutron are run in CosmWasm. Just to unpack this a little bit more, it's a virtual machine that functions on the principle of like WebAssembly, which is what browsers today use to run very complex, heavy in resources pieces of software like games in browsers with a high degree of performance, essentially. And you have the same properties for smart contracts, e.g. you have a very high degree of performance, and you also have better security over other implementations. For example, like CosmWasm resists to most of the attack vectors that are commonly used against Solidity-based applications. Like reentrancy is not an issue in CosmWasm. It's not possible to have, essentially. And so making sure that this very important piece of software is not just maintained, but really thrives and has the ability to pursue very strategic directions in its development, so that it becomes the best version of itself and continues to do so and continues to be open source for the long term is like very important to us, both because Neutron depends on it, but also because this is like a critical piece of the ecosystem, and that since Neutron is a cross-chain smart contracting platform, a good chunk of its power is actually enabling users and applications to interact deeply with applications and users and user base that are on other networks, right? To connect very directly with them. And so, like Neutron strives when the ecosystem as a whole strives, essentially. And so like the strategic investment was basically a step in that direction, right?
Very true. Also appreciate the breaking news. Always love that on the pod. Spaydh, we are getting a little tight for time here, mate. A couple more questions and then we will wrap up. One of the things that you guys did a couple of months ago was the launch of wstETH. And this was back in September along with XLR and Wormhole. What exactly is wstETH?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I think there was a couple of objectives that we wanted to meet with this initiative, which was like wstETH today is, you could say almost the backbone of the DeFi ecosystem. And for a good reason, it's an asset that represents a long exposure, I guess, to one of the most important, largest networks in the industry. It's yield bearing. It contributes to securing and decentralizing the validator set and stake of the Ethereum network. So it's a very appealing asset, and it's one that makes for very good collateral as well. And so you see today like 50% of Avril's, I don't remember which version, but I think it was V2. TVL, when I checked like a couple of weeks ago, was made of wstETH today. And so on the one hand, bringing this asset into Cosmos was important because there was strong demand locally for it, and because it's an asset that would allow more diversified treasuries and exposures for users. And on the Lido side, on the DAO side, there was this, like Lido has historically been fairly conservative when it comes to bridging. It's, the main bridges that it had were initially like bridges to Ethereum L2s, validating bridges. And so to like enable the DAO to accept bridging to other ecosystem where validating bridges were not available, the framework for doing so needed to be very robust. But at the same time, there was some pressure to do so, because not dealing with the situation would have resulted in a situation where multiple different denominations would have been bridged to the ecosystem. And when compounded with IBC, e.g., like even, for example, like XLR bridged wstETH on injective and osmosis would not be the same token. Wormhole bridged XLR, like Wormhole bridged wstETH bridged to Neutron or another chain would also not be fungible together. And so to avoid the situation and enable the bridge to eventually be updated and like continuously built into something that resembles the more long-term vision of the DAO when it comes to the control of its asset, basically to like a new solution was required. And so that's why we moved into the direction of bridge aggregation. We've partnered with, like Lido has selected Neutron and XLR as the sort of like initial bridge system, but the bridge is being developed into a bridge aggregation solution, which will rely on XLR, Wormhole, and potentially other bridges like CCIP or others in the future, so that the asset is resistant to the failure of any given bridge. Provides like message passing, so that cross-chain governance and other things, and is sort of like under the direct control of the DAO. Essentially, the DAO will own all of the bridges architecture, even though actual bridge providers are used as relayers. But it will, as a result, be able to control the asset that's locked, that's bridged away, recover it in case something goes wrong, but also update it and shape it over time as it sees fit, rather than sort of being at the whims of like third-party providers, essentially. And so this was kind of like a win-win situation, whereby this allowed Cosmos to gain a very valuable asset that can serve as collateral, bolster the DeFi ecosystem, while also enabling to set sort of like a good precedent for what very robust and functional bridging to other, like between ecosystems, can look like in the absence of some things like some framework like IBC, basically. So yeah, the idea was to really open this channel between Ethereum and the Cosmos ecosystem, bring assets and users closer there as well. And I think since September it has grown pretty nicely. I think that's the trend that we'll continue to see, essentially.
Oh yeah, That's been very nice indeed. Spaydh, you've been on fire here, mate. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. Give me some hot takes before we let you go today. Doesn't have to be crypto related. It can be health, wealth, happiness, AI, aliens, you name it, food, whatever. But give me a couple Spaydh hot takes before you let us go today.
Oh, that's a hard one. Coming up with a hot take on the fly. So I think 2023, you could say, has been kind of like the year of modularity, right? It has culminated with like the launch of Celestia. There's a bunch of rollups being built on Celestia, on Neutron connecting with Celestia. We launched bridges to Celestia. There's a number of like other solutions that provide like data availability and such, and other modular components like Avril and others that are like launching left and right. So I think really modularity has been the theme of this year. I think in next year, what we'll see is sort of like monolithic architecture being reframed, because monolithic is, arguably connotated a bit negatively, but there are some benefits to it, right? Like Solana, for example, and I'll totally have been explaining why for them it's the best architecture for what they're trying to do. And so I think what we're going to see is monolithic architecture being reframed with a focus on integratedness, e.g., there are some benefits. And in fact, Neutron is kind of like the cross between those two worlds, like the modular world and the monolithic world, whereby one of the key features, actually value propositions, a feature, not a bug, is that because the stack between the virtual machine and the application layer of the blockchain itself is very closely integrated, we're able to provide services to dApp builders that other platforms just couldn't, essentially, right? We can expose securely very core functions of the blockchain and make them available to developers to build better applications, right? So things like shaping the block production, shaping the liquidity and the market itself, recapturing MEV and getting automation without relying on like third-party bots and such. And all of this is possible through integratedness, right? And so what I think we'll see is modularity is going to remain something that's extremely relevant. And the projects that are working on this, I think, are going to continue growing and be like very defining parts of the industry. But I think other types of architectures will sort of like start being reframed into something more positive that has its own benefits and advantages. And I think we'll see a strong focus on like integratedness and the benefits that it can bring when used correctly, right? Like integrating composability, interoperability, and application-specific infrastructure into one package to build an application that's able to reach further and to provide a better experience and a better product overall. That would be my hot take, I guess.
I love it. Spaydh, you were absolutely dropping knowledge bombs all pod long. Thank you so much for coming on, my man. This was truly a treat, and I have a lot of homework to do. I'll definitely be re-listening to this one on a walk and taking notes because, again, you made my head spin in the best of ways possible, and can't wait to have you on for round 2 in the near future. But until we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you and Neutron online and on socials?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, me personally, I don't know if that'll be so interesting to folks out there, but I'm on Twitter. I'm 0x Spaydh, SPAYDH. And then Neutron, you can find everything about neutron.org on Twitter, neutron_org. And, we have a Telegram community, a Discord community. Feel free to join these, as that's where we'll be able to really engage with you, get your questions, answer them, discuss about all of the things that you think about the crypto and how we make the world better. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing from everyone.
Unreal. Spaydh, thank you so much, mate. Appreciate it. And wishing you and the team all the best. Can't wait for round 2.
Likewise. Take care.
Folks, what an episode with Spaydh, core contributor of Neutron. He was absolutely on fire today, dropping knowledge bombs left, right, and center. We love to see that. If you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking to the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything, especially you, Stas. You are the GOAT of editing, the best sound editor out there. Thank you for everything, my man. Also, the listeners, back to you guys. Keep on growing those bags. Keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.